Back to Brian's Beat. Join the show by calling 508-996-0500. New Bedford's news talk station, 1420 WBSM.
George of the jungle, friend to you and me. Watch out for that tree.
Now when he gets in a scrape, he'll make his escape with the help of his friend, an ape named Ape. And then away he'll schlep on his elephant ship while Maggie and Ursula stay in step. I said,
George of the jungle, friend to you and me. Watch out for that tree.
ooh.
Hour two of Brian's Beat. Some nice sunshine today. In fact, it started cool when I was driving in. It was 53 degrees at the Country Chape. Give you an idea that the temperature is starting to drop. The daylight part of the day is getting shorter and shorter. We'll talk more about that next week. As I was bringing up during our last bit, going into the news, there is a book titled Happy Endings by Margaret Atwood. I don't know this author. A woman friend does, and she likes her writings, but she had no idea of happy endings. And I read some of the excerpts that I found courtesy of a father of a daughter in this English classroom over at Westport High School. So I'm just going to read a little bit more. Mary falls in love with John, but John doesn't fall in love with Mary. He merely uses her body for selfish pleasure and ego gratification of a tepid kind. He comes to her apartment twice a week, and she cooks him dinner. You'll notice that he doesn't even consider her worth the price of a dinner out. And after he's eaten dinner, he has intercourse with her. That's how I'm going to say that. That is my term, not the one that is in the book. And after that, he falls asleep while she does the dishes so he won't think she's untidy, having all those dirty dishes lying around, and puts on fresh lipstick so she'll look good when he wakes up. But when he wakes up, he doesn't even notice. He puts on his socks and his shorts and his pants and his shirt and his tie and his shoes, the reverse order from the one in which he took them off. He doesn't even take Mary's clothes off. She takes them off herself. She acts like she's dying for it every time. But because she likes sex, not because she likes sex, exactly. She doesn't. But she wants John to think that she does, because if they do it often enough, surely he'll get used to her and he'll come to depend on her and they will get married. But John goes out the door with hardly so much as a good night. And 3 days later, he turns up at 6 o'clock and they do the whole thing over again. So there's a little bit more to this. Mary's friends tell her they've seen him in a restaurant with another woman whose name is Madge. It's not even Madge that finally gets to Mary. It's the restaurant. John has never taken Mary to a restaurant. Mary collects all the sleeping pills and aspirins she can find and takes them in a half bottle of sherry. You can see what kind of a woman she is by the fact that it's not even whiskey. She leaves a note for John. She hopes he'll discover her and get her to the hospital in time and repent, and then they can get married. But this fails to happen, and she dies. Now, you've heard a part of what this English teacher was reading to ninth graders, freshmen, in his literature class. My question is this why we send kids back to school before Labor Day? For stuff like that? I'm not questioning the literature. I am questioning, is this appropriate for a teacher to read in school? Now, the daughter who complained, I'll let the father decide if that's a complaint or not. The daughter who talked to her father, she was shocked. That's what she told her father. The father was shocked that a teacher would read this kind of information in a classroom. And according to the daughter, we'll get the father to clarify this, other students within the same classroom were also shocked by this. Me? I guess I'm not so shocked anymore. We see the drag queen story time hours that go on. We hear about other books that are getting into school libraries. So why should we really be shocked by something like this? Do I like it? I absolutely do not. I think, what the hell is going on? But I'm not going to get shocked about this stuff anymore. Because quite frankly, I've stated it numerous times. Until people decide to move and speak with their feet, you've got administration after administration that will keep on allowing this stuff to happen. What happened to the teacher in this respect? We'll find out when we talk to Bruno Morrow when we come back. I have a feeling that Bruno Morrow wasn't saying yabba dabba doo when his daughter, freshman at Westport High School, came home and started talking about this teacher, Matthew Shivers, and the book Happy Endings. Now, I don't know about you, but Happy Endings does not seem to fit the passages that I was reading in this book, or from this book, I should say. These are passages that Mr. Morrow put up on Facebook. I happened to catch them. There was a story about it, and apparently a couple of the TV stations have shown interest. Let's talk to him right now. Bruno Morrow, good morning. Welcome to Brian's Beat on WBSM.
Good morning.
So I read some of the things that you put up on Facebook that happened to come my way. Let's start with, how did you feel when your daughter told you about this stuff?
As soon as she got home, she started talking to me about it. I know I was kind of thinking, what is it about and so forth, because she knows how, the stuff that she reads at school sometimes kind of triggers her or can affect her in some way of things. Some kids can have that in situations. So, I just started reading a little bit, and then once it got to the part of, the swearing and so forth, she didn't read it, but she's like, you can read that. So as I was reading that first, I believe it's phrase B on it. And then all of a sudden I'm like, what? I could not go any further reading it. And she's like, there is a lot more. So, I was kind of aggravated right away, saying, how can a teacher be reading this out loud to any student? I know to some parents, it's fine that some teacher could be reading that to them. But in my situation, and I know for a lot of other parents' situations, which I've had a total of 102 messages that I counted today on Facebook this morning of parents reaching out to me, please let me know what is going on with the whole situation with the meeting that you had in school. So I know I was very aggravated, pissed off, and, I just couldn't believe the situation that was given to these kids. And not just as an assignment, it was basically read out loud by the teacher with no, hesitation, saying any word on it. And kids were, very weird in the classroom. some were kind of laughing about the issue, as she stated to me and stated to the school yesterday in our meeting that we had with them.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk to you about the meeting that you had with Westport school officials. But before we go down that particular road, I'm looking at the release that you put up, mm-hmm. and these are things that kids talk about. But I think where I draw the line, I can't speak for you, but where I draw the line is this appropriate material for a school teacher to read? So in other words, if I were to read that to your daughter, I wouldn't be surprised if the authorities came after me and I'm in handcuffs for doing, correct, I don't know, child endangerment or whatever the proper title would be. If you correct. Did that to one of my kids, I might even punch you in the nose before the cops got there and we'd both be hauled off in handcuffs.
Correct.
Why is it
You're
okay
100%.
For a teacher to do that?
And it's not. And I know I've read some comments of people stating they read worse, they see worse, they go on social media, they read, you don't know what they're reading, you don't know what they're listening to. Well, as a parent, I do keep track of my kids with that. So for a teacher to be saying it is not okay for a teacher to read that out loud, so I'm 100% with you on that.
Well, so Bonnie, who reacted to the post, this isn't anything these kids don't already know about. I'm not going to argue that. I'm sure she's right. But correct. Is it all right for a teacher to read that?
Correct.
So that leads me to this part of the story. You met with school officials either yesterday or on Thursday. They state that this isn't part of the curriculum. That's a pretty blasé response.
Correct.
You want to add to that?
Yes. So when I actually met with them yesterday at 1 o'clock, I believe it was a superintendent assistant. There was another gentleman, I believe his name was Michael. I know I've had so many people message me and so forth, so it's kind of hard to remember every name that's been out there. But, we were talking about the whole situation, and they told us right away that should not have been allowed, or presented to any student, even as an assignment and so forth, which I explained to them, I'm sure there's a story out there that can lead to a porn video out there that leads similar to that story. Would it be okay to put that as a video for every classmate to watch? And they said, no, not at all. There were some things I did not like what they said to me in the meeting, which it was, next time something like this ever happens.
Next time?
Reach out to us. Yes, if something like this ever happens next time, please just reach out to us first. So basically, it doesn't get to the point where it's at right now. So basically meaning, news stations getting involved, people getting involved, parents asking questions, and so forth. So were they helpful in some ways? Yes, 100%. They're going to look into it and so forth. At the same time, that was one comment that I do not like. It's basically stating, as a parent, call the school, push it aside, let's not make a deal about it. At the same time, if you don't do that, how our parents are supposed to know what is going on in schools if they keep it hush-hush, which I did not like that.
And I don't blame you. I don't like it. It sounds like they're trying to sweep it under the carpet. And what's going to happen to this teacher?
I asked that situation. I told him I do not want this teacher near my daughter. Matter of fact, my daughters that go to that school. So they said, we'll make sure that he is not teaching. None of them and so forth. I know Tuesday she asked class of English, so we were kind of confused, which I even asked my daughter when we got home. If you're not having that teacher, how are you feeling okay if you go into that class that day? So they did ask her that. So, we're worried what could happen, because I know some people have searched photos on my Facebook page, taken photos of my kids, posted on their, pages or the Westbrook community thing or Fall River Reporter. I've seen pictures of mine. I've ignored all the messages out there. So, I'm hoping that she doesn't get bullied by any kids, because I wasn't just doing this for my own kid. I'm looking out for every kid out there as well, and for parents that, are worried about this.
Yeah, I hear you, and maybe the term noble isn't the proper one to use, but I hear from where you're coming from, and I appreciate it. We're talking to Bruno Morrow. I'm labeling you a concerned Massachusetts dad. I could use the term Westport, but Massachusetts works in this particular case. So how do, I bet that the school is going to do their best to make sure that your daughters do not have this teacher, Shivers. Do you know how it's pronounced? Shivers isn't teaching to your daughters, but
Correct.
He's still in the system.
Correct.
He's still going to be able to, maybe you're the only parent complaining, and not only that, they didn't like the way you complained. So basically, they were going to slap this guy in the wrist, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
But then, go back into the classroom and, if you do it again, maybe you leave out some of the words.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, like, going back to that, they did state to me that I would not know what would happen with the situation with Mr. Shivers, because, obviously it could start some conflict if I didn't like their decision on the teacher. So, which I even said, I'm like, well, my daughters go there. I'm sure they'll know if he's still teaching or not, which I even mentioned to them. I know you guys got to give him a slap in the hand and so forth. And, I think that's what's going to happen, which they've asked my daughter while we were in the meeting, did Mr. Shivers read this out loud to you guys? Her answer was yes. Did Mr. Shivers hesitate to say any of the wording in the book? She said no. He read it out loud clearly with no issues at all. So, they noted everything down, because it's like, if you find it kind of weird that, a grown man can actually talk, say those words in a school with no problem. But me as a person, I commented on the Westport Community Schools, which I have it as a screenshot. I took a screenshot of it. And I didn't even say a swear on it. I just said I tagged everyone on the post. And it was something like, basically, parents should be looking out for their kids because somebody's trying to tell them to get, to swear on it. But I put in ... EK at the end. So they responded back to my message, sorry, we had to delete your comment due to the swearing. So I said to myself, oh, this is pretty interesting. You have to delete my comment on Facebook, which I didn't even really spell the whole thing, but it was okay for your teacher to be reading this out loud.
Exactly. I'm just going to read a couple of lines here because people are tuning in and, driving, and maybe they didn't catch it all. Mary falls in love with John, but John doesn't fall in love with Mary. He merely uses her body for selfish pleasure and ego gratification of a tepid kind. He comes to her apartment twice a week, and she cooks him dinner. You'll notice that he doesn't even consider her worth the price of a dinner out. And after he's eaten dinner, I put in the word intercourses her, and after that he falls asleep. And then it goes on, Mary does the dishes because she doesn't want John to think that she's untidy. She puts on fresh lipstick. What is this about? And maybe more to the point, why is it necessary for this male teacher to read this story in school? I guess I'm missing part of that, but was Matthew Shivers jilted somehow, some way down the road, and this is his way of getting back? I don't know.
Correct. It makes you wonder.
It does, but nothing, to your knowledge, nothing has happened to this guy except that your daughters will not have him as a teacher.
Correct.
Are you? Have you reached out to any members of the Westport School Committee?
I know I did send out a message to the superintendent. I can't remember his name. I believe it's Thomas.
Thomas Albin, that's the superintendent. But what about somebody on the school committee?
No, not yet. I'm actually good friends with one of them that is in it. He's out of Florida, which I will go talk to him Monday and speak to him about the issue. So I will see what happens with that. And he lives in Westport, but I know where he works in Florida.
I got you. We're talking to Bruno Morrow. Any other parents from that particular class reach out to you at all?
Yes. Like I said, I read this morning, I had 102 messages from parents to please let them know what is going on, with the whole situation with the meeting. So I do have a lot of parents, to try to help the situation. But like I've said to them, if we don't do anything about it, they'll just go on and do what they need to do. So if we give up on it, this is what's going to happen. It's just going to get worse. It's day 2.
So what is next steps? I think you're right on, but what's the next step? You have 102 concerned parents. Is anybody thinking, all right, let's go to the next school committee meeting and protest about this particular reading and this particular teacher, and what are you going to do about it?
Correct. And that's one thing that people have stated on messages to me, which I've told them. I never really was into going to these meetings and so forth, but going forward, I will be. So several of them, I have put them in a group message. When I started seeing this morning, I had more messages at nighttime. So it's going to be kind of a little pain in the butt to get them all together, but at least try to put them all in a group text on Facebook Messenger or even on a phone call or text message, whatever it is that we have to do to all get together to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Oh, I agree with you. Sandy wrote up on the Facebook in a comment, form a group and stop this madness. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of comments. Fran, right. sick people in this crazy world, or at least as you can see it in this crazy town of Westport. And by the way, I like Westport. I think it's a great town. I believe that the school system, like all the other school systems, they know they've got a monopoly, so they can do virtually anything that they want. And I believe the book isn't a part of the curriculum. That's what was written, not part of the curriculum, but it doesn't mean that they don't go oink, oink, shoulder bump and say, just don't get caught.
Correct.
You ever get that feeling?
Yeah, dude, I get that feeling a lot of times.
Yeah, I hear you, man. So what bothers you more about this? The sex part or the suicide part?
The sex part kind of affects me a little bit. But then again, obviously we know what's out there and so forth. The part that concerns me a lot more is the suicidal part, due to the fact that there's a lot of kids out there that are dealing with depression. There's a lot of kids out there that are dealing with a breakup. A lot of these kids date, kids and so forth. So, there's a lot of, kids go through breakups, kids go through depression. Sometimes they don't know what to go through. So there could be a kid that could be going through that same storyline of what is being read by the teacher. And then they think, well, maybe I'll get, attention from Johnny or Leah and so forth. Maybe I could do the same thing as this person tried to. I won't do it as bad, but you really don't know. So that's my concern, is the fact of the pill taken just to trying to gain the attention of the person's name. I forgot that person's name in the book. Just to try to see if that person's going to like me or come at me, and care of me. That's my concern, is the whole suicidal part. That one is beyond crazy that, that's given in school. To me, it should be like school counselor. If you're having an issue with depression and so forth, you're supposed to go talk to them. Like I tell my girls all the time, never hesitate to talk to anybody with your issues. Somebody can always be there for you, because you never know what you're going through we're always here for you, regardless what it is, which I even mentioned that to the school. My girls can talk to me about anything. They don't have cell phones. They don't have social media. They don't have none of that. So I'm here for them, and I wish more parents would be like that. I'm not a perfect parent, but I try to be the best I can for my kids, and my main concern with them is to make sure they have good education.
Well, I would say this to you, Bruno. The two words perfect and parent don't go together.
Correct.
You know, it's a learning process from day one until they become parents.
Correct.
So it sounds like you're trying to do your best. And again, what is the best? That's very subjective. I will say this. My woman friend says that the author, Margaret, again, from China, the last name, Atwood, I believe is. She says the author is a very good author. Did you read the whole book?
I did. I read the whole book, and I know my wife was looking into more of her books that she has. So there is quite a bit of books that she has that is about, sex and suicidal and all that. So my wife was reading quite a bit of books yesterday, not reading like to the total extent of it, but she was reading several of them and seeing like what this lady is about and so forth. And not saying that she's bad at all. This book could help some people. We'll say that, but at the same time to a child that is 14, 15, 16, even 17. If some of these kids get in trouble by 17 years old, they get, pulled over by a police officer or whatever, people will always say that's still a child. But for this situation, you've had some people that say it's not really a child. They've read worse. They've done worse.
I hear you, man.
People go back and forth.
Yeah, look, I'm believing that the book could be helpful. I am of the opinion still that it's not something that a teacher should be reading in a classroom.
Correct.
And apparently, if we take the school officials at face value, they believe the same thing because it's not a part of the curriculum. What they do to the teacher, I think that if nothing else, the parents need to make an example of this particular teacher. And whether that means he's suspended for X amount of days, suspended for the year, or terminated, it needs to be that serious.
Correct.
And if it's not, and I don't want the excuse, well, we're short school teachers. Everybody's short school teachers.
Correct.
But this is beyond the pale. Look, I know you have appointments coming up today. I do appreciate you coming on to the show. And I wish you the best. And do me a favor. You've got my number. Keep me informed of what's going on. And we can keep the listeners here informed, too.
Awesome.
All right?
Definitely will.
Thank you,
so much.
Bruno. I really appreciate it. Bruno Morrow. His daughter, again, is the book overtly disgusting? No. But as you think about your tax dollars, and I'm an advocate for the taxpayer, so I will easily revert back to this. Your tax dollars are going toward books for students to read in school, or to take home to read, or to have a teacher read to the students. Is this the type of book, happy endings, that you want a teacher to read to your kids or your grandkids? Is this what you want your tax dollars spent on? And I can sit here and boldly state no. Now, if you disagree, I'll gladly hear what you have to say. 508-996-0500. Let's see. Sandy, disgusting. This has gone too far. Bridget, this is outrageous. Rachel, and this passes for great literature? And I've read some of the other comments to you. So if you'd like to comment on this, I'd love to hear from you. Quote of the day. And the quote comes from the hero of San Juan Hill. Although I think that has been disputed as to whether or not he really was the hero of San Juan Hill. We don't need to go into that part. It is Teddy Roosevelt, and the quote is, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." Speak softly and carry a big stick. If you were hearing from your daughter about this book, Happy Endings by Margaret Atwood, and I would agree with Bruno that, you know, the sex is bad. You know, why even read that kind of stuff in a classroom? But the last part, her friends tell her they've seen him in a restaurant with another woman whose name is Madge. It's not even Madge that finally gets to Mary, it's the restaurant. John has never taken Mary to a restaurant. Mary collects all the sleeping pills and aspirins she can find and takes them and a half bottle of sherry. You can see what kind of woman she is by the fact that it's not even whiskey. She leaves a note for John. She hopes he'll discover her and get to her to the hospital in time and repent, and then they can get married. But this fails to happen, and she dies. Is that appropriate to read to freshmen in high school? Even drawing a line that says you're north of the boundary as opposed to being south of that boundary, I think this is still south of the boundary. Sure, you've got schools that are already talking about suicide. It was mentioned to me by a woman friend, you know, you've got a lot of people that feel that way. And I said, sometimes it's a numbers game. And I said, let's say you've got 500 people in a class, and 1/5 of them have sexual relations with somebody else. How many of that 1/5, so now we're talking 100, have committed suicide? I mean, we're still talking a tiny fraction. Does that mean you don't want to reach out to those people? At what particular point do we say this is not the purview of the schools to go down? But they think so. They really believe it. Now, there are states, I don't think the Commonwealth falls into this category, but there are states that state, they have it written into law that you cannot talk to parents if a child is contemplated suicide. Don't you think a parent would want to know if their child, don't you think a guardian would want to know if their child has suicidal thoughts? Transgender thoughts? Bisexual thoughts? Homosexual thoughts? Question mark thoughts? 508-996-0500 is how you get onto the program today. Hello.
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 Number one, I think they have to start having workshops on common sense, especially for teachers. You're easily influenced by a lot of teachers, young
students
people. And when he's reading, he's giving a solution to your problems by suicide, and then the details of what you use. I can't believe it. I'm a teacher, and I do have children from the past that grew up and committed suicide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And one even murdered someone and then committed suicide. So when you see the craziness of the world, every class, no matter what age, you got to think, try to keep it clean up those books. Because one time I got a book from the principal to read during reading time. Once a week we had to read to the students. And right in the middle of the book, I stopped. There was a very thin book. And I stopped because I was going to say to the students, the kid said to the mother, "Shut up." I would not allow that. I stopped. I said to the student, "You're going to see something you probably never see a teacher do." I tore that book right in half and put it in the recycle. And let the principal ask me where that book was. I could show her where it is. In the recycle. I don't do that to students because I consider myself, I always consider myself the age of who I'm talking to, who I'm teaching. So I know how it's like because I was 8 years old. I was 12 years old. I was 15. I started my student teaching in the high school. And then I worked myself down because of teachers that had injury, and they had to keep placing me. So I did a lot of the grade levels. I can't believe that person. I don't know how long he's been teaching in Westport, but ask, why did he choose that book? How did he get that book into that classroom? Because teachers have the right to read and take out from the classroom the books that they don't want.
So why did he choose that book?
I think he wanted to be hip. That's the way he thinks every teenager is. And let me tell you, they're not. They're all kinds, but they are the type that will do those particular things, put lipstick on. Even first graders try to imitate their teenage brothers and sisters. They try to be
or mom or dad.
Yes, they're influenced. They're influenced with tattoos. They want to do everything some parts of society does. And you got to fight that and say, hey, there's other things that you can be thinking of.
You know, I'm going to break this down even some more because the suicide is there, the sex is there, the language. Again, if I were to go into a school and I was to use F-bombs, I would expect to be asked to leave the school. Now, I understand the teacher is reading from a book, but does that really change the situation?
No, I had a student that one time pulled that on me, said a bad word to another kid. I brought him to the office, called up his mother, and I told him, your son's going to tell you what he just said in the classroom. That kid cried.
Oh, boy.
So I don't allow it, and they understood it, and everything was, hunky-dory. I loved teaching. I wish I could go back, but it sounds like it's not the same.
Well, my son tells me it's not the same. He decided after a year to go back into it, and I'm waiting for the report card after the first week. But I'm going to ask you, since you are a former teacher, what should happen to one of your former colleagues now for reading this in school? There's got to be some type of punishment here. What do you think should happen?
Those teachers would get together and go, you shouldn't, or just not even say a word about it. They mind their own business, or they think, oh, that's fine. Then it's a unique attitude that many teachers have. There's a lot of jealousy going on. There's a lot of things that go on with teachers like a student's classroom. You got all sorts. I don't think they would say anything.
So if they wouldn't say anything, then they don't believe that any punishment should be meted out to the teacher?
Other classrooms are doing the same thing and not getting caught because the kids are not realizing it.
Really? Wow. Hey, thank you so much. Sorry for your loss. I do appreciate your comments on the show. We continue on Brian's Beat. Hello. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's a little bit silly, isn't it? I mean, you can put lipstick on a teacher, but you can't make them teach. You can put lipstick on a priest, but you can't make them preach. you can do a lot of things that you can't make them do once they got the job. Politicians also. And this, I think, that you brought out here is something that's important because I don't think it's that odd. I think people have once they give them the job title, they get a little bit kind of like the president's son. You know, spit out paint through a straw, and you're a master. You're a master of the arts. You get a teacher's license, and anything goes. You're the master. You take those children for 1 year, and you just have at them, especially if they're approaching puberty. You don't put books in there. You don't, 2 and 2 ain't 4 because the teacher says it ain't 4. And I'm going to go into the world knowing that 2 and 2 ain't 4, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to go in the world knowing God is dead. I'm going to go because my priest told me so when he wasn't wearing his frock, and so on and so forth. You know, it's a minority thing, but it's a cancer. And I think they're bringing it out, and that guest of yours is a 5-star with a tremendous insight and great questioning. So I keep it up. But you got me thinking. I'm going to try and follow up on this if it's bigger than I think it is.
Oh, I think this thing is huge, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Many thanks.
Oh, God,
many
really?
thanks for your call. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we talk about this stuff all the time. Hello.
Hello. Hi. My name is Michelle Furtado, and I fought the schools for years when my children were in school. You most know me for Common Core, but I did forward you an email today of an email that I had written. I wanted you to see specifically the date on it because it was 2013 when I first approached this about English and literature and what was being recommended in our schools. And at that time, it was foul language and subject matter. And then now I see 10 years later, it switched to transgender and everything. And it breaks my heart that this is still happening. And I can tell you as a parent, I went before the school committee. I went and wrote letters to the Sheriff's Department, the Commissioner of Education. I was on the radio. I was writing letters to the Standard Times Monthly on this. It just makes me just shiver that this is still going on, and people are still, children are still being subjected to it. And as for that young girl to come home and be shaken up, yes, my children, even at that age, and the way that the educator explained it is just that I need to expose my children to more subject matter so that they aren't affected by this, because this is real life. And they're taking children at such a young age. The books for my children were when they were in middle school, when I was seeing these summer reading lists come home. And it's at a very young age. And you know what? We as parents have the right to say what our children should be exposed to. And if you'll see in my letter that I sent to you, that I did send to high school and middle school teachers in over 80 of the Mass districts and towns. I sat at my computer for hours and hours, days and days, emailing to individual teachers that I could get their lists off of the school websites. And I had some kind of angry principals calling me, and I had a few rude teachers calling me, telling me to mind my business. And I did have a few teachers that I highly respect to this day in support of this, but this is the way it is. And
so let me ask you, and Michelle, you and I know each other
right.
very, very well. My theory has always been that you speak with your feet and you don't go. There school people that I work with out on the left coast, they actually staged a one day where they kept the kids home from school so the schools would feel it in the pocketbook to try to make them change some of the stuff that you're bringing up right now. I know at least in one school district it was very successful. When you have about half your students sitting out, that's pretty darn successful.
The very first year when my child came home and said, "This is my summer reading book," I did like I do every year. I went right over to Borders, got the summer reading book. That night I read it because I was going to read it ahead of the child, and I was reading it, and I read like a bit of it, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I asked my husband, I was like, "Do you think this is appropriate?" And he's like, "No." I went and read more. I'm like, oh, my gosh, do you think this is appropriate? He said, no. And I did this whole book in 2 days. And then I wrote a letter, and I marched it right over to the middle school, which had already closed and let out for the summer. And I insisted at that desk to talk to the principal. And I saw him walk by, so they couldn't tell me he wasn't there. And I went and gave him...
Michelle, only because of time, I've got...
Oh, yeah, I know, Brian. I could talk to you another time and tell you. I mean, but this has been going on.
I believe you, but I got to go.
I sent you email,
really appreciate it. I'll look forward. Thank you.
Brian.
Time for me to step out. Ken Pittman will be up next. We'll do it again next